Let's go.
All right, Kev Mitchell from Jebediah. Welcome back to Australian Musician.
Thank you very much for having me.
Kev, right off the bat, full disclosure, I'm a Carlton Football Club fan. Last week's game, do you feel you were robbed?
I didn't even see it. I can't comment. Well, for those who are unaware, I'm a West Coast Eagles supporter, and I have not been following their games at all because it's been such a horrible couple of years.
I thought you were Frio.
No, okay, right. No, I'm an Eagles supporter, but Freo, I've heard, have been doing very well, but I take it they just lost to Carlton on the weekend.
Yeah. So is it Cav that's a Frio supporter?
Cav from Eskimo Joe is a Freo supporter. I'm not sure how big a supporter he is. I think Stu from Eskimo Joe is the bigger footy fan, from what I can tell.
Okay.
But yes, they're very much Freo centric over at the Eskimo Joes. So yes, you may have got your Cavs and your Kevs mixed up, which happens a lot.
Yeah. kind of sad I brought it up now.
Congratulations, well done. I'm glad that Carlton had a win. Carlton are doing well, aren't they? Have they lost a game yet?
Not yet, no.
Wow. Okay. Well, here we go. Finals bound.
We're actually not here to talk about footy. We're here to talk about a new Jebediah album, the first one in 13 years. It's called OIKS. First single was Motivation. What was the motivation for creating the album?
Well, I guess I have to cast my mind way back to 2018. Was when we sort of first got together. And I think the motivation was, well, obviously a bunch of time had gone by. After Kosciuszko, a few years after Kosciuszko, we did make a little bit of an attempt to kind of get together in a rehearsal room and see if anything kind of came from that. But we spent a few days and just didn't really click. So then we just kind of walked away from it. But I suppose I was always kind of thinking in my head, how could we do it? And I was inspired by reading about how Blur had made their record, The Magic Whip, where they were on tour, or they found themselves with a bunch of days off in, where were they? Hong Kong, I think. They might have been on their way to Australia. It might have been like something to do with some cancelled festivals or whatever. I can't remember now. But and anyway, I was reading this article where they talked about they rather than go home early, they decided just to spend those days in Hong Kong. They just booked out a recording studio and they just went in and just mucked around in the studio. And it sort of inspired me to think like, well, maybe Jebediah could just, rather than sort of, spend years getting together, doing these kind of writing jam sessions and stuff, what if we just went straight to the recording studio and just started pressing record on everything we did? And, I thought we could like go in at night and just jam for 3 or 4 hours and just record everything and then come in the next day and just kind of cut and paste and delete and save. And so I presented that idea to the other guys and they were all up for it, and that's what we did. So yeah, we started in 2018, went into the studio in Perth that we recorded Kosciuszko in with Dave Parkin, and we just did about 4 days or 4 nights of jamming and 4 days of kind of going through our jams, and that kind of got us started. And then after that, the process sort of took a few different kind of, went on a few different turns, but yeah, that was enough to kind of get us going.
Yeah, it sounds like Dave Parkin had a fairly big role in the album.
Yeah, he did, and he did with Kosciuszko as well. And he really has sort of, to kind of borrow a bit of a well-used cliche, but he's very much the 5th member of the band when we're in the studio together. Because he plays instruments sometimes. If we're a bit stuck and we need like a fresh perspective on something, he'll get on a guitar or whatever. But also to because we were making this record we were writing in the studio, and we were kind of piecing songs together in the studio like we never have before. The studio kind of becomes an instrument itself, and he's obviously playing that instrument. So, so yeah, we really did sort of integrate him into the creative process, to almost to the point of being an extra band member.
Yeah. Let's talk about some specific tracks. The opening track, Bad For You, kind of strolls into the album. Is the track order still important to you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's records, that format, that sort of traditional album format is still how I envision records. It's still how I think about them, still how I see them in my head and hear them. So yeah, we still kind of make records. We still record to that format as much today as we did back in the 90s, when we first started out. But yeah, the idea of starting the record with that song is because that was the very first song that we wrote when we picked up our instruments and had our very first jam. It wasn't an idea that I had or anybody else had coming into it. I just started plucking away on those notes. Really, I mean, how you hear the song, how you hear the record starts is kind of how we sort of found our way into this record. And I think it's like, looking back on it, it kind of, it's highlights, I suppose, that very first kind of noise that we made together in the studio was, it'd been years since we've been in the studio, and we didn't really know what to expect. We didn't know if this was going to be a success or a failure or whatever. So I guess there was a little bit of tentativeness, maybe. It kind of stands to reason that the first song is kind of like, almost has that it kind of captures a little bit of that tentativeness, that sort of like feeling of insecurity, a little bit of what's going to happen here. We have expectations of this thing, but we're trying to kind of keep under our hats and just kind of hoping for the best. And so yeah, that song, to me, when I hear it really captures that moment. So I hope that, like, by putting that song at the front of the record, it's kind of inviting people in to that feeling that we had and that process that we were kind of going through, and hopefully it kind of gives them a bit of an idea of like what it was like to be in the room.
Yeah. Gum Up the Bearings follows. When I first heard that track, I immediately thought of The Clash.
Oh yeah.
Was that a band that featured in your influences?
Not so much lately. I mean, obviously over the years, definitely. I mean, if anything, really I actually was listening to a lot of Joe Strummer solo stuff in the last few years. So maybe it has kind of crept in there subconsciously. But yeah, I mean, for us, that was, we were kind of in a way, we were kind of paying homage to our old favorites, Archers of Loaf. And so to us, it's kind of sounds like that. But yeah, I mean, I guess it all kind of comes from that kind of punk rock, that sort of punk rock melting pot.
Yeah. I love the guitar intro to April Slumber, and the guitar vibe throughout the whole song. Do you recall how that feel came about?
I don't. I mean, that sort of guitar effect at the start there is Chris, playing that. But no, I mean, that was a song that we sort of jammed, that came from one of those sort of nighttime jams. And it has a real, to me, that song reminds me a lot of the kind of song that we would have written in the first year of the band's existence. There's something quite kind of innocent and kind of, young about that. When we first started the first year of the band, we wrote a lot of songs that had that sort of jangly, I guess almost like an English kind of jangly verses kind of thing. So it immediately kind of to me, it sounded like the kind of song that could have appeared on the earliest Jebediah release, you know. But yeah, that's Chris, you know, mucking around at the start there, mucking around with some, I don't know, even what he's doing, bit of a, you know, tremolo or something, or yeah.
The beginning of Rubber Man is really interesting too. With that, it's like a detuned guitar or bass. It seems like you're open to any idea at all.
Well, that song really kind of highlights the more experimental side of the record making process, of coming in with no songs and kind of writing in the studio. And you know, we all love that song. It's probably my favorite song on the record, and because it actually it sort of came along by accident. I was tracking guitars for a different song, a song that I can't remember which one, but I was in between takes, and I can't remember if I'd broken a string and was putting on a new one or what was happening, but I was definitely winding a string down or up. And you know, Dave was recording everything. And it was going through a bunch of effects and stuff as well. Often when I'm tracking stuff, I'll be playing guitar, and Dave will just have like a, you know, an effects unit, and he'll be the one like, you know, pressing buttons while I play. I'll just kind of let, if he, that kind of gives him the ability, I guess, to, if he hears like certain effects or whatever, he can access them really quickly. And so I think we were doing that, and while I was just like mucking around with this string, and just by accident, we kind of hit upon a kind of sound, and we recorded it because we recorded everything, and we kind of made a loop out of it. And it had this real sort of rhythmic, we kind of created basically a rhythmic loop out of this really loose guitar string. And that was how that song started. You know, it was kind of one of those moments where me and Dave were like, oh, wow, that sounds really cool. Let's just stop what we were doing and let's just build this idea up and see if we can get a song out of it. And often for me, in those moments, you know, it's like, oh, if you've just chanced upon this interesting sound or whatever, then it's like, okay, well, grab a guitar. What chords fit over it? You know, what chords are in tune so that I can make a chord progression over the top with. And then when I figure that out, then start coming up with a melody, and then we're away. You know, start writing a song. So it's a really great example, that song, of just the sort of the freedom, I suppose, that we kind of have making this record that we haven't had in the past. You know, like we just never would have written songs like that in the past. We did things in a very traditional way where you'd go into the studio with your 12 songs that you'd rehearsed and written and spent, you know, however long in a rehearsal studio working up. And then you go into the studio and you record all the drums and you record all the bass and you do all the guitars. And it's a very systematic kind of way of doing things, a very safe way of doing things. And there's a reason why you did it. It was probably because studios are really expensive and all that kind of stuff. But now it's kind of like we do that all those kind of rules have sort of thrown out the window now. And we just kind of go by instinct, and we pick up things and drop things whenever we feel like it. And yeah, I've got the freedom now within the band to be able to, when I'm in there by myself, to be able to just go off on tangents and follow my creativity and my inspiration, and it's totally fine. Whereas, you know, 20 years ago it wouldn't have been. So yeah, it's just the kind of, yeah, that song just is a real kind of example, I suppose, of just how different it is to be in Jebediah now.
Yeah, I suppose because of the way you created some of those songs, they might develop further when you play them live as well.
Yeah, well, we haven't played Rubber Man live yet. I've just been mucking around with it on acoustic guitar, but yeah, we'll develop a lot. It's almost like, you know, a song like that, you're bringing it to the stage. It's almost like reinterpreting a song rather than kind of just playing. Oh, this is a song that we wrote and here's how we play it. It's kind of like taking the recording and going, okay, well, how do we reinterpret this song for a live setting? No, that's what the challenge for that song will be. But I think it'll be pretty straightforward. I mean, at first I was a bit worried, thinking, oh, how are we going to do it? But once I started picking up a guitar and on the acoustic and playing it, I just started thinking, oh yeah, you know, it shouldn't be too difficult, because at its core, it's a very simple song. So it's just a matter of just kind of, you know, it's almost like doing a cover of your own song, you know. That's what it feels like.
Yeah. You are going out on the road for a few months with Magic Dirt. When you go on tour and you have to pick a support act, apart from being an entertaining support act, I guess it's important that you get on with them personally. Magic Dirt, I guess you go back quite a way with those guys.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, we've over the years done countless shows and festivals and things with them, and but we toured. The last time we did a full national tour with them was in 2000. They were the middle band. The opening band was Sleepy Jackson, Luke Steele's band before Empire of the Sun, and yeah, I've got great memories of that tour, because that year we'd spent about 4 months overseas. We in North America and New Zealand, and we did this tour of Australia when we came back home. So it was a massive year for the band. That was on our second album. And yeah, we've just been great friends with those guys ever since. You know, lots happened in that time. You know, Magic Dirt have gone through all sorts of stuff in that time, and losing Dean, and the band looks a little bit different. But yeah, it was sort of, I don't know. There's that shared history, I suppose. That kind of, after many, many years, those bands that you've had that history with, and you're still going. Yeah, there's a real camaraderie that comes along with that, and I think it's going to be great to tour around Australia with them and experience that. And I think the audience kind of shares a bit of that feeling as well, you know.
Yeah. Many of the venues you've played heaps of times before, like the Gov in Adelaide, the Corner in Melbourne. Does it make a difference to a performance when you know your way around a venue?
Absolutely. Yeah, venues make a massive difference. And, you know, sometimes, you know, it can be because the venue isn't necessarily one you've played before, but maybe it's really grand and big, or maybe it holds some kind of cultural significance or whatever. And that kind of gets you excited. Or maybe it could be the opposite. It could be a dingy shithole. But if you've played it a million times and you've got all these great memories of being there, that can also be really great, you know. And I guess these venues, yeah, sort of somewhere in between that, I guess, you know, somewhere like the Corner in Melbourne, and yeah, the Garvin in Adelaide are places that, yeah, we've played many times over the year. I mean, the Corner, particularly in Melbourne, is a venue that it almost is like our home ground on the eastern states, you know, being a band from Perth. Um, you know, Melbourne was the first city outside of Perth where we started to get an audience of our own. And back then it was the Punters Club was the venue. And then when you started selling out the Punters Club, and you moved up to the Corner, and we played there so many times over the years, and I'm just so glad that it's still there. You know, it still exists. It hasn't really changed much. The band room's got a bit nicer. It used to be like a little storage cupboard on the side of the stage. Now it's actually a comfortable room. But apart from that, it's pretty much exactly the same as it was 25 years ago. It hasn't really changed much. So yeah, I think that makes a massive difference in creating a good vibe.
Yeah. As we said earlier, 13 years since the last album. Did the experience of making the new Jebediah album want to make you do more?
Um, it was a bit of a slog, to be honest. I mean, it was a labor of love, 100%. But you know, it took us years, because of course we went through COVID during that time. We had 2 years where we couldn't get into WA. Me and Brett, being based here in Victoria, couldn't get into WA to work on it. And there were moments there, you know, a couple of years ago where I wasn't really sure if we would ever finish it. So such a relief that we did. So yeah, but I guess what the experience of that record has shown me is that we kind of took a chance on something. We took a big risk, really, from a creative point of view. It was risky. And it paid off. It worked. So I guess it's kind of given me that confidence that, yeah, you know, we can kind of step outside our comfort zone, or just step outside the rules that have kind of governed previous experiences, and we can do things differently, and we can get results that are really satisfying for us, and most importantly, we create stuff that's different to what we've done in the past, because that's really important to me now. Is you know, I don't ever want to make a record just because it's my job. I want to make records because we got, something to offer, something new to offer, something that we haven't done before. And so I feel like this record has definitely it's kind of met those kind of expectations.
Yeah. All right, Kev, well, it's been great to catch up again. We look forward to
Thanks,
the
man.
coming out on the 12th and seeing you on the road.
Thank you very much.